Die Sprachübertragung beginnt jetzt. Alle Teilnehmer befinden sich im Zuhörermodus.
Welcome everybody back to our webinar. Yeah, sorry for the last time. Unfortunately, we had some issues and we're not able to come back into the session again properly. And yeah, so today we will do this webinar again, how to camera setup. Please welcome my co-moderator, Janina. Hello, Janina.
Hi, everyone.
She will answer your questions or put the questions on me. So if you have any questions, you can use the overlay from the webinar tool to put some questions there. Yeah, so today we will do following contents. We will talk a bit about EDID and the render engine config. The unit management, how are the units treated in Pandoras Box, objects and texture, just an overview what this is and how it's used in Pandoras Box. How is the render path in Pandoras Box working? Then we do a bit of camera setup, so how to use, why using special parameters and not the other ones. And finally, a multi-screen setup to show you the possibilities of mixing up any displays. That's what we do today. So I will shorten the first part a bit because we had that already, not too short because maybe there are some few new people who haven't listed last Friday. Yeah, so let's dive into that. So what is EDID? EDID is basically the information the display sends back to the graphics card in which dimension and which parameters the signal has to be transmitted to be able to be shown on screen. And this normally looks like this. So these are some of the parameters the EDID is transmitting back to the graphics card. So this is, of course, the resolution, the frequency, the bit depth, and some more parameters about the image to be built around the center or the main image information. Yeah, so these are all things you have to keep in mind if you talk about EDID. Let me have a short look. Yeah, this EDID information is very important for Pandoras Box because the aspects in our render engine, they all rely on this information. So that's why it is so important to use a proper EDID and not, for example, using a custom EDID. So we absolutely do not recommend to use that feature. With this feature, you can set your own resolutions and your own timings in NVIDIA control panels. It's also an option, I think, in AMD graphics cards. I'm not too sure about that because I'm not using those. Yeah, we do not recommend to use that because things can go wrong if you use that. It's very simple to use, so you can enter some properties for these values. I think not all of them though. And that's the issue already. So if something is not set correctly here with this tool, then it can be hard for a render engine or for the display to show things properly, right? So even if you can see the desktop with your customized resolution, maybe the full screen of Pandoras Box is not. So yeah, we we recommend to use proper EDIDs. So you can set up with certain tools your own EDID, but that's a theme for itself. So and it's not our theme, so we will not do something about that. How to build an EDID. That's a very complex thing which you should then learn somewhere. So we rely on EDID information which are already present, so from a monitor or something else. So that's what is about now, and the tools we can use for that. So instead of using that, we recommend to use the existing EDID information and the Quadro cards, which are in most of our in all of our products. So the compact players, the players and the servers, they all use Quadro graphics cards from NVIDIA, and these have an option in the system topology, and I will show you that on the living. I have not opened that. Let me shortly open that. So this is the compact player. You can see there in the back. There it sits. And this is the display directly connected to it. So I'll grab the graphics card settings. And there you can see in the system topology, you can see this monitor connected, and you also can see the these EDID information here. So, and what we do, so you always have an issue if you lose any EDID information on the output while Pandoras Box client is running, right? So if the client is running and something changes, things are getting odd there. So, and to avoid that, you can use a very good option of the Quadro cards to make your output stable to that. So if you click that little EDID button here, you have this menu, and there you can export the EDID from any connected device. So every connector is listed here. Actually, I'm using HDMI output 1, and this is the manufacturer name of the monitor. So now I can export the EDID. I did that already here. And you press save, and you save that EDID information there. So in the next step, I can now load this EDID file. So let's browse for it again. There, sorry. And now I can load it on the already connected one I do, and on a second one. So this will imitate that there are two connected Dell displays on connector 1 and connector 2. And if I press load EDID, I think the VNC tool will close by that, because change in resolutions is never a good thing for VNC tools. So, and it tells me successfully loaded. So a special thing I want to show you is that's where the last time I struggled a bit there. Let's put on the taskbar just to make you aware of it. So it can be that after changing things, especially if you have Windows 10 and big resolutions like this is actually a UHD resolution here, it will automatically set the scaling options. You find it in settings, system, display. There we are. So there you find the scaling factor of Windows, and it will normally change it to something like minimum 150 or 250, something like that. So what you have to do there to still be able to use your the VNC tool and the mouse position properly, you need to change the advanced scaling settings here. I hope I can do that now without changing, and you set it to 100. So no scaling, press apply. Therefore you need to log out from Windows to make this happen. So if you set that, you have to sign out, not log out, sign out and sign in again, and then this change will be made there. All right, so that's how to fix any issue with the VNC tool. All right, so now we have two monitors with an EDID. And now you can see there are two monitors recognized by the graphics card. The only thing you have to be careful if you remove, so it should be stable now. If you remove one cable or the other one, you should still be careful by removing both of them, because the graphics card is still able to see if there's a connector plugged in or not. So that's something which is not held by this procedure. So there may be an issue if you remove all of the cables, right? So, but for the usual case, you have to change a cable, or a cable is not working, so change out the cable. That's a good workflow to avoid any issues inside the software or something like that. Are there any questions so far?
Nothing very specific at the moment. Thank you.
All right. So yeah, let's move on. The render engine config. So let me shortly start the client here. So then it should be visible here. So I started already a little project, and the dual compact player should not, yes, it's connected now. Should also, yes, now it's the correct values for the outputs there. So that's the default when it comes on, more like that, different colors here. So I have a test pattern here. It should be visible there. Yeah, you can see because it's very bright there. So I go for full screen, and now it should be visible on this screen. Yeah, that's my test pattern. So that's the default. Just push test pattern there in UHD resolution. That's how it looks. So let's have a look in the render engine config. So we go for configuration and render engine. You can see the EDID information back here. Let me short look on my So first, so this is how it looks when you first enter the configurations tab. So you have all the connected sites available here. So you can see the information for each connected device here. So and if I switch now for the compact player, there you have these incoming EDID information. So it's two outputs at UHD resolution actually, and this is the applied output connector. So yeah, this is where I can do some routing. I will show you in a second. First, I also want to show that if you use any virtual device from this tab in your project, let's grab a dual server. I directly name it dual server 1, for example. And now this is also part of my config, and I can enter the expected resolutions here. which makes it easier to work with that in our preview, right? So I can put the expected resolutions in there and hope that it's correct, because yeah, I talk about that later, what about positions and units and things like that. Yeah, and finally for this topic, the output routing. So let's say we have, I have screen 1 and screen 2. Let's have a little preview on that. So I split it here shortly. I will explain later how I did that. So I have the left side screen 1 and the right side screen 2. The cameras are looking in those directions. So screen 1 should display that part and screen 2 should display that part. And actually you can see there, it's screen 1. Maybe I do it a bit bigger for you. Let's do it for both directly. Yeah, that's better. Okay. So screen 1 is actually routed to there, and maybe you experienced that already. So the output routing, and if you plug in monitors and deplug and change resolutions, and the NVIDIA setup will always mess things around, and it's awful. Yeah, how to come around that? So I don't care about what is where and whatever, and the processing after my output is something different. But I know what output should hold what. So then I can change the routing just here. So I don't care about the messing up of NVIDIA. I just go for these routings, and if this screen should display what's coming out of output 2, I just change it here to output 2, and now it's my second output there. So I just changed, I didn't change my setup here at all, so all my programming stays what it is. I just made sure that that on the output, this is now coming out of that cable or that output connector from the compact player there. So that's the output routing, which is very comfortable to use when NVIDIA and Windows are messing things around with outputs and yeah, numberings and things like that. Any questions for that?
Sorry, I was just typing. No, still nothing that needs to be answered by you.
Okay, thank you. So let's head on. I'll explain a bit about our render engine. So yeah, in the preview you can see it already. That's the render engine, and yeah, actually the compact player displayed there. And of course, our engine is using some kind of units. And as there is no special unit in a virtual 3D space, it's called generic units. And generic units, that's how our render engine calculates every position and relations between things. So the first monitor which is connected, this is mostly the local. So for my manager, the monitor which EDID is setting up that first initialization of the render engine, and this is what configures my units or the relation of. And now it comes 16 units, because Pandoras Box Render Engine always relies on 16 units to fit the first connected monitor device. So mostly the local monitor on the manager, if you use a manager scenario, will set 16 units to the size of the monitor. So it's, in this case, I'm using 1920 pixels as my main monitor. So 16 generic units will or is set to equal 1920 pixels. Yeah, so this width actually is 1920 pixels. Check. By default, since version 5. I can't remember, we do not use the generic units as default anymore here, but the default is pixels, as you can see here. You still can change that in the configurations tab if you go for unit management, and there you can change if you're using pixels or the generic units. So actually you can see I pushed that layer, this layer, not very precise there. So layer 2, 16 units to the right. Yeah, that's this one, just for you to see. So 16 units, or if I change back to pixels, you can see it's 1920 pixels to the right. Okay. So yeah, that's so I can use pixels or units to move things around. And the important thing to remember is this always equals 16 generic units. Any questions so far?
There have been a couple, but I answered most of them, and I hope I pushed the most interesting ones to everyone. That's
good. So let us know if it's not answered completely or you have more questions. Feel free. You can always push them in. Thank you so far, and thank you, Janina. So I will head on for now. Let's go again for the unit management. So this is an interesting bit here because, as I said, the first monitor will set the multiplicator, how these 16 units apply to the pixels. And this factor, you can see it exactly here in the unit management. And as I'm actually using from my client two UHD screens, it may be a good idea to set this this factor to a different value. And as you can see with this button, I am able to choose the ratio to adopt to any resolution I have connected via my clients. Yeah. So if I change for the UHD, it will change this factor, and it relies per it's 3D units per 1000 pixels. So it's not going for the 16, but the factor counts 1000 pixels, and this is to one generic unit then. And now my whole setup changed. So this is now pushed to a different pixel there, because the ratio between pixels and units changed. So it's always a good idea to set this factor at the start of a programming of your project, and not after you did many position things, right? So that's mostly about positioning. It's not necessary to do that because everything works proper. Yeah, it's you still can use different resolutions. So if I'm mixing up resolutions now, so let's get this dual server within the preview, for example, it will have always the correct size. So that's actually HD, and these are the two UHD screens. So the size will not be changed, just the ratio between units, what our render engine is always doing internally, and the pixels what we users like more, because we mostly go for pixels and where do I want to see that certain pixel. Okay, I change it back to HD and my screens are coming back. This hasn't changed at all because it's on the 0 position on the origin of the render engine, so no changes there. All right. Maybe some more questions before we move on?
Yes, there is indeed something that you could explain again a bit closer, which is if I have connected one 4K and one HD, or let's say, because it's easier, one UHD and one HD monitor.
Yeah.
Could you explain why one is initialized with 16 units and the other one, what is that then?
So initialization is only once. So we have to so you have to work in one relation. So, and this is all what the unit management is doing. So when you set your project up, you tell Pandoras Box what amount of pixels fit into 16 units, and that's all what the unit management is doing here. So either if I have those two possibilities, so I have HD and UHD, so I either set 16 units to UHD or I set it to HD. It's not changing the behavior, and it works in both ways. It's just how it's interpreted in the render engine and the 16 units. So normally you don't have to care about that at all. It comes into play when you use when you start using incoming remote values, for example, which have to use or which want to use, however it is, the units and not the pixels, or the other way around. So this just makes sure that that your units are set to a certain pixel count. I hope this answers your question. Thank you.
This should be good. Thanks.
All right. Then let's move on. And I want to tell you a bit about objects, just as an overview. What is an object? An object is a polygon mesh, and it's vertices which define certain points, and the mesh connects the end points of the vertices to have polygons available, and the polygons will then hold the texture information, right? So the texture comes on the object. As you can see in my little graphic here, there are different examples for objects. So objects are very digital, so you will never have a very round thing. So you always have you only have points which defines a curve maybe. So as you can see here, the more points you add, the more curve you can have, but it's never a real curve. Like in analog, you can have a paper and make things like that. This is not happening for objects in the digital world. It's always the more vertices you add, the more impression of a curve you have. And these are different nets, which or different ways how the mesh is put together on objects. So the object is a virtual thing which defines a geometric thing somehow, and it also holds the information for the texture. So if I put the texture on it, how will it be mapped? And there's no resolution information on the object at all. So the only information the object gives you, or the object gives the texture to be mapped on, is from 0 to 1. So maybe it's better here. So the texture will always be applied on these polygons here. And actually this this example, you can see the texture. Let's say this is the whole texture. Then the texture information is from 0 to 1 in X, or in texture coordinates say U, and the V or Y, texture information calls it V, is also from 0 to 1. So 0 to 1 in both coordinates means the full texture. So if I put there 0.5 to 0.5, I will only see that part, but mapped on the whole thing here. So that's how the texture information applies to the object. And of course the texture that comes with it. So texture is always a 2D information, and basically it's the information which pixel has what color. It to not mix it up with some coordinates in the virtual space. The coordinates for the texture are called UV, just to make it different than X and Y. Okay, and of course the texture has the resolution, right? So you can choose what amount of pixels this texture holds, right? And however the resolution is, if it's 100 to 100, or if it's a UHD resolution, the object from 01 to 01 will apply the full texture on that part of the object. Just a general knowledge, because what is Pandoras Box doing? Pandoras Box always takes an object and the texture, or you put the texture on that, and this is then, for example, a layer. A layer is nothing else than an object and a texture. Even if you put not actively an object onto that layer, Pandoras Box will put a default object for your texture in there to make the texture able to be displayed, right? So that's what Pandoras Box is doing there. Of course, you can change the object to something different. Let's do a short show up here. So if I go here, let's jump there. And if I use some kind of texture here, let's do the geometry. So I put it on layer 1, and automatically it will put the default object in there. The default object always applies to my 16 units, right? Or refers. And the texture will then define, because of the size, how large it is. Okay, that's texture and objects. Let's shortly press store, and now it's part of my secrets. Of course, I can use different objects. Did I put something in here? The teapot, for example. So if I change now, let's use a brighter texture on that. So if you use a different object now, the object changes from my 2D default object to something else, like the teapot here, for example, right? Okay. Yeah, and the render path. So the render path, how is it working? First, we have the composition space. That's the first thing you can see here. So if you go for all cameras, you see all the composition space. So that's the first part. You have layers, you can put textures and objects there, and you have the camera for the outputs. Switch to that one, makes it a bit better visible. So I have my cameras, camera 1 and 2, sitting in the same spot here. Actually, one is looking to the left, one is looking to the right. And everything what is in this line of sight, also if I use, or I can't use the Z-axis on there, so let's quickly, sorry, I changed to the server to be able to use the Z-axis. Look, let's put some texture on there. There we go. All right, so everything what's in this line of sight will then be rendered to a new texture. So also if I go there and I use the Z, not the scaling, the position, sorry, it will render this part only, and these parts which are not in the center, so they are the outer parts, will not be seen anymore by this camera. And this everything will be then mapped to, let's look here. So this is my new texture, and this camera will output a texture, right? So just a 2D color information of the composition space. All what's in this line of sight will be then rendered to a 2D texture. Let me visualize that a bit different. So let's go for that one. So actually, that's my composition space, right? And I have a flat object in the back and a 3D object there. This is my camera, and it sees that line of sight. So this is the texture which is rendered by this camera. And now this texture will be put on another layer in the output path. All right. So there, by default, we again have a default layer there, and this texture from the camera will be applied there, and we have an output camera sitting there with again a line of sight, and everything what's in this line of sight will then be rendered to again a texture, and this texture finally will be sent to the graphics card. Let's visualize that in Pandoras Box. So this is my camera 1 texture. So if I go for the output pass and I zoom out a bit, you can see this is the very same, apart from this gray color here around. This is the very exact same thing we did before in the composition space, right? So, but using this texture, again, I can use, at least with the server, I can make use of all of these things, position. So I can again go on all these features. Why are we doing this twice? So, of course, it uses a bit more performance because we have to render twice, but it brings a lot of great features with it. So let's go for this visualization again. So let's say we have a curved screen, or we have to do some mapping stuff. What we do there, so if you use the a mesh on the output, or if you use this keystone tools from the output, let me show it. So the keystone feature here from the output keystone, these features here, it's a 2D thing, right? So if you use those, it will be applied on the object on the output path, which makes it possible to use the composition path as we want, as easy as possible. So I don't have to care about mapping and crude things, whatever happens to the output and the display, however crude it wants to display its thing to make it look nice. I don't care in the composition pass, because there I do everything how I want it to look like and how I can use it very comfortable. And yeah, this setup is always as comfortable as possible, or so that I can use the composition space like it will look afterwards in the real site. Okay, that's our idea about that. Yeah, that's how a mesh on the output works. And there are some more possibilities we can use with that. For example, we have some output routing. So it's possible in Pandoras Box to route a layer directly into the output. So in this example, the ball, which further was used in the composition space and pushed into that texture from this camera, now it's routed directly into the output. So there, you can still use the 3D object in your output directly, and I will show you how to do that. So these options you find in the of course in the layer and the inspector for the layer, and there you can say, okay, this layer I want it not to show up in the cameras, but directly in the output. And there you can see already my Z position is then used on that in the output path directly. The render order is not changing for the output path though, so it's still layer 1, 2, 3 and so on. But first layer in the output path, so behind layer 1, if you route it directly to the output, will be the camera 1 texture. So the order is camera 1 texture, camera 2 texture, and then layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the order of the output path. Yeah, that's if you have no questions, that's it for the output for the render engine, Pandoras Box render engine, how it works and why it works that way. Do we have any questions, Janina?
Nothing right now.
All right, then we can move on. So next thing is the camera setup. So that's the main topic of this webinar, of course, how to set up cameras and why do it that way. Of course, I have the possibility to move cameras in 3D space. Let's go back here. And I for now give the cameras a different color to better identify. So the first camera is blue, let's say. The second camera is kind of purple. So these are my two cameras, and by default, they're both sitting at the or looking at the origin, right? And the default value on the z-axis is minus 25 units, I think. Now what is it? Camera here. It's 3000 pixels. Whatever that is. It's 25 units, I think. I'm not sure. You can calculate that. So that's the default. And now we have the possibility to move these cameras around. So we have the viewpoint and target as a server-only feature. So only servers are able to use these parameters there to move the camera, for example, a bit to the left. What we want to create, or how we want to use Pandoras Box is mostly the way make the virtual or take the reality into virtuality. So make the setup possibly most exact to your real world, and then you're able to use it exact in that in the same way like you would imagine in the reality. So if a layer turns around through all your screens, I want to have the same setup in Pandoras Box, because then I can do a movement through everything, and the layer will move through everything in reality too. So that's the most comfortable way to use that. So you then say, okay, my projectors are sitting that way with a bit of overlap maybe. So this is my setup. I do it roughly just to show. And where's my texture gone? Blue texture. That's unfortunate. What did I do wrong there? Give me a short moment. Maybe I can.
Your layer number 1 is still routed to the output.
Yeah, be careful with those routings. Thank you, Janina. That's good. So there it is again. So that should be my setup. And you can do it that way with servers though, to fit the real world very exact. So these are my projectors and that's how I use it. The downside of it is if you now use the Z position, you can see that the cameras are not hitting that layer anymore. So this is how my screen 1 is looking, and this is how my screen 2 is looking. And yeah, let's move it. Let's push it on those two. Oh, there. That's how it looks on the screen. On screen then. So with a bit of overlap, of course, but it's not correct. So what we do instead is not using viewpoint and target, but what we do is we go into the perspective of the audience. So and the audience, so let's say this is one point of view, and a point of view is a very important thing if you do mapping stuff or projector stuff. So to imitate the audience point of view, because it's just, let's say, one point, it's two eyes, okay, but it's one point from where you're looking. And this is how you see the screen. So let's say we have a dual soft edge blend, and I recommend to use the X offset for this kind of setup. And there's a little align function. If you want to use that, I press it 3 times to have this symbol pointing to each other. And while I have selected both of those layers, so then I go on the offset, on the X offset, and I push it in that direction. And this just changes the offset of the target, right? And this way, I leave the camera position in one spot. And now I can see this layer also if I use the Z-axis on both cameras. And let me show you how it looks on 2 screens. Oh no, not, I want to see output 1 and output 2. No, not the output. I did some keystone there, so let's use the camera for now. So this is the soft edge area, right? So this is the overlap. And when I use now the Z position on layer 1, that's how I want it to look, right? So that's why I'm using the X offset. And the X offset, or all these options, are also available with the players, right? So let's shortly look into the players. Camera, there we go. So we have the field of view, the aspect mode, offsets, and Z roll. So all these possibilities we also have with the players. Any questions so far?
Nothing at the moment.
Thank you. Okay, let's do it a bit more complex. So just to show you how you can do it, I add 2 more dual servers to make a soft edge blend out of 6 outputs, right? So, and how I recommend to set those up. So that's dual server 2 and dual server 3. And let's go for all cameras and 1 user. And I want to imagine a 3x2 soft edge blend, right? So, and I have prepared somewhere a test pattern for that. Yes. So let's use that one. So this test pattern, you can see, let's make it a bit bigger. I prepared to fit HD resolutions on each of that section. So that's how you should prepare your soft edge. So calculate the projector positions, where should they point to, what area should they cover, and you make a test pattern where you can predefine all these positions, right? So, and now I have to push the cameras in the correct spot there. Let's get rid of that. So, and I want to show you another feature for Pandoras Box to exactly hit these areas. I put some values in here. So the texture is 4800 times 1800 pixels. That's the full resolution, and this is 6 times HD with overlap areas here, and of course top bottom here. So, and the first camera should then fit exactly on this spot, and you can use calculations directly in these value windows here. So if I go for the camera, use the wrong way, so it's 4800 pixels divided by 2 to the left. So then the center of the camera should move exactly on this edge, right? Let's try it for now. And there you go. Let's show it here. Camera 1. So this is exactly the middle now. So that's how I can push the middle of my layer to the outer edge of my test image there, of my test pattern. So I have to move it back half of the screen size. So that means I put it in completely again, just for you, 4800 divided by 2 minus 1920, because that's the resolution of my output, divided by 2, because it's only half of it, right? So I put this calculation in here, press enter, and it directly hits the X limits exactly, right? So the same I do for the Y offset. So in this case, this is 18, or in this case, minus 1800 divided by 2 plus, what's the 1080 divided by 2. There we go. And now it's very exact on the pixel of my test pattern, right? I can repeat that now for all my 6 cameras, or I can take those values. I can just take these values, right? So the second camera is then 1440 and this inverted, right? And then it will push itself down here. And so on. So I can move on with these cameras. So there, for this one, I don't have to shift X at all. So it's just minus 360. Sorry, you can see it now. Minus 360 and 360. There we go. And the third one is then minus 360, and this is there. Oh, sorry. And there we go. And now if I can change it to that look, I go for all the outputs. Output 1, output 2, no, output 2 should be here, sorry. Output 1, output 2, output 1, output 2. And of course I have to share this texture on the other servers as well. There we go. And let's get rid of that soft edge keystone thing there, sorry. So, and now this is all my outputs out of that composition, right? So that's how we recommend to use the camera and the outputs. And of course, if you have any distortion there, keystone mesh things, you put whatever mesh on the output, and there you go. Any questions so far?
Not on that topic. It is explained very nicely.
Thank you. So to finalize it a bit, what do I have? I have some few points. So we want to mix up different screens, of course, and maybe some weird things. So we can try, for example, to add the compact player to this composition, right? So let's put that in, and let's get rid of that, and let's move that away. So did I spread that? Sure. So it should also display that. That's good. You can see it here. So that's actually a full a UHD. Let's change that back that you can see it better here. So the compact player output is now showing all this part. So it's huge because it's a UHD resolution. But maybe you can imagine that this is a small, or we have a huge projection, and in the middle we have maybe this screen or a larger screen, but it's still just small. So it's the size is just a bit of it. So it's maybe just the as big as the 4800 here, like this number in our real setup. So, and I wanted to merge into that view. So I want to have the projection and the screen should then display only that part. So there I have to, if I want to do that, I have to change the, is it 1 or 2? I'm not sure. I have to change the field of view for that camera. So if I do that, I can adopt, sorry, you can see it there. I can adopt, that's not the correct output, so I switch to camera 2 there. No, I'm doing it in the server, sorry. I wanted to do it here. So field of view, no, there. So now you can see, so I can now position it correctly to the 4800 and make the field of view as big as I need it, right? So now this display inside my big projection will display the correct part to be a correct part of that projection. So if I use now a pip or something like that, let's quickly push something, color bars for example, as a pip in here. So make it a bit smaller, that it's really a pip. And now if this pip makes this movement in my screen, it will also show up at the correct spot and size on my inner display. So it moves over the projection, and when it crosses that that monitor, it will still be very immersive with that situation. Of course, you do not have to calculate, you do not have to calculate the field of view. You can also use the value on, or pixel values on the camera. So if you turn out the aspect ratio, or the aspect ratio we can leave because it's still 16:9, we can define the pixel size in our setup, in our composition here, and let's just put something in like 600. Oh, sorry, I have to deactivate that one. 600 times, I don't know, times now 16:9. Let's do it 160 to 90 or something. Then it will push it to that pixel size. There you can see, maybe a bit small, but yeah, yeah. And now, of course, maybe I do it for now a bit bigger. As you can see, it will change or auto-calc. If I use these values here, it will auto-calc my field of view and set it to the correct value, as long as I'm not having it in as active. So if it's active, you can change things here and it's not doing something, right? But if you reset, it will calculate the field of view out of this value. So, and finally, let's say my screen is rotated a bit, like this. So if it's rotated like this, I still can adopt this by using the rotation here. Of course, I can measure the roll to fit it perfectly. for now, maybe it's sufficient to use it that way. And yeah, so now it can be a tilted screen inside my projection or inside my LED wall or whatever display you have. And this is how to adopt to this. So whatever happens now here, let's move this layer again, it will display correctly. Any questions so far?
Nope.
All right, then this was more or less everything about this webinar. Let me look at my list. Yeah, the only thing I have to say, maybe we do another webinar about how is mapping, what mapping possibilities do we have, so which pixel shift where, LED wall setup. So that's maybe, if you're interested, leave us a comment in our on our how is it called, forum. Sorry. Yeah, leave a comment in our forum what you expect us to do next, what do you wish to have knowledge about, and we will try to answer that. So thank you for now, thank you for joining, and stay healthy and have fun. We will stay a little bit, maybe you have some more questions, so we will stay a little bit if there are any questions. Goodbye. Thank you, Nina.
Bye, everyone.